Snow had already buried half the front porch by the time Martha Ellison pushed open the old farmhouse door. The wind carried the kind of cold that stung the eyes, sharp as a whispered insult. Inside, she found what she had feared all week. Her family gathered in the living room, not speaking, just existing, breaths tight, shoulders stiff, hearts miles apart. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, glowing softly, but even its warm lights felt dim against the silence that wrapped around the house like a heavy quilt. The smell of pine and cinnamon, normally a comfort, was overshadowed by the bitterness floating in the air. Martha's boots left small puddles of melted snow on the wooden floor as she walked in. She could hear the crackle of the fireplace, but not a single word from her siblings. Daniel sat with his jaw tight, staring at the floor. Rebecca kept her arms crossed like a gate no one was allowed to enter. Even their mother, Helen, seemed smaller this year, trapped between her children's quiet resentments. In Martha's hands was the envelope that had started the argument weeks before, the one about their late father's land, who should manage it, who felt overlooked, who felt wronged. She had hoped Christmas might settle the dust. Instead, it only revealed how deep the cracks had grown. A log snapped loudly in the fireplace. Martha flinched. It sounded too much like something breaking, something fragile and important. She swallowed hard, the taste of snow and worry still on her lips. This Christmas morning was supposed to be peaceful, but peace felt far from this house and even farther from their hearts. But it didn't start there. We must go back a little in time. Before we continue, if this opening touched your heart, make sure to subscribe and stay with us for more stories of faith and healing. And tell me in the comments, I welcome God's peace into my home. Winter had always arrived early on the Ellison farm, settling in like an old friend who never bothered to knock. Long before the December winds picked up their icy voices, Martha had already begun her quiet preparations, mending quilts, stacking firewood, and humming the hymns her mother used to sing while kneading dough at dawn. The Ellison farmhouse stood on a gentle rise, overlooking acres of dormant fields. In summer, the land looked like a soft patchwork of wheat and wildflowers, but in winter everything rested, soil, trees, even the old fence posts leaning under the weight of frost. Martha often found comfort in that stillness. She believed God whispered best in quiet places. Life on the farm was simple, honest, and never rushed. The sun ruled the rhythm of their days. Roosters crowed long before the sky even thought about turning blue. Cows breathed warm clouds into the cold morning air. The wooden barn doors creaked in their familiar way, reminding Martha of her father's footsteps, slow, deliberate, steady. She missed him more with each passing winter. Before everything fell apart, the Ellison family had its own pattern of harmony. Daniel, the eldest, handled the heavier work with their father, harvesting, repairing machinery, managing the cattle. Rebecca, though stubborn and sharp-tongued at times, was the one who kept things organized, bills paid, pantry stocked, appointments remembered. And Martha was the bridge. The soft voice between two strong ones. The steady warmth between their mother and her siblings. Their mother, Helen, used to sit by the window each morning with her Bible open, her finger slowly tracing the pages as though she could feel the Lord breathing through each verse. The house often filled with the gentle sound of her prayers, words rising like soft steam from a kettle. But after their father passed, something slowly shifted, like the first crack in a frozen pond. The land, once the pride of their family, became the weight everyone carried differently. Daniel believed he should oversee it because he had always worked it. Rebecca claimed their father told her he wanted the property sold someday. Martha, caught between both sides, whispered that maybe it wasn't about land at all. Maybe it was about grief no one had dared to name. Yet the disagreement started subtly. One autumn afternoon, Martha remembered standing in the barn doorway as sunlight filtered through the slats, dust dancing like tiny sparks. She heard Daniel and Rebecca arguing in low, tense voices. "Dad wanted me to handle things," Daniel muttered. "I'm the one who stayed." "You stayed because you didn't want anything to change," Rebecca replied sharply. "That doesn't mean the rest of us can't move forward." "Move forward by selling everything," Daniel snapped. "You think that's what he wanted?" "Maybe he didn't want us chained to this place forever." Martha stepped back before they noticed her, her heart heavy. It wasn't the argument itself that hurt. It was how familiar it felt, like the beginning of something none of them knew how to stop. That evening during dinner, the silence wrapped around them tighter than the cold outside. Forks scraped quietly against plates. The stew simmered forgotten on the wood stove. Even Helen seemed lost in thoughts she didn't dare share. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "Children, your father prayed that this land would keep you close, not pull you apart." Daniel lowered his gaze. Rebecca blinked back tears. Martha felt her throat tighten, but grief speaks louder in private than around the table. And as weeks passed, their father's absence left more space for resentment than healing. One morning, Martha walked the fence line with her gloves stiff from frost. A red cardinal landed on the wire, its bright feathers cutting through the grey air. She took it as a small sign, a reminder that beauty could perch even on broken things. She whispered a tiny prayer right there in the field. "Lord, help us find our way back to each other." That was before the letter arrived, before the decisions, before Christmas became a gathering of tight smiles and wounded hearts. Back then, the farm still held the echo of laughter. Back then, the house still breathed warmth. Back then, before bitterness found a seat at the table, everything seemed repairable. But winter reveals what summer hides. And the cold was only beginning. In the weeks before the Christmas gathering, when the air still smelled faintly of autumn leaves and wood smoke, Martha Ellison found herself clinging to one simple dream. Far simpler than the disputes and the paperwork and the tension that had settled like dust over her family. She wanted peace. Not the loud peace people argue about, not the forced peace where everyone pretends. She longed for the quiet kind, the kind her father used to bring into a room just by sitting down, the kind that wrapped itself around a family like a warm quilt on a winter night. Her dream was small, but it pulsed inside her like a stubborn ember refusing to die. One late afternoon, Martha sat alone on the back porch steps. The sky stretched big and open above her, painted in soft strokes of orange and fading gold. The farm was silent except for the faint lowing of cattle in the distance and the cluck of a hen settling for the night. Martha held in her hands a small wooden cross, one her father had carved years ago from a piece of old oak that once belonged to the barn. It was her symbolic object, her quiet anchor. The edges had been worn smooth by years of her holding it during prayers, during storms, during moments when life felt heavier than her shoulders could bear. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the roughness of the porch wood beneath her and the steady heartbeat of the earth settling into winter. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't need everything to be right. I just need my family to find its way back. Help me be whatever you need me to be." A soft breeze moved through the trees, as if answering, gently pushing a few last leaves across the yard. Martha felt something loosen inside her, just a little, enough to hope. Her dream wasn't about keeping the land or choosing a side. It wasn't even about resolving every disagreement. It was about Christmas, about gathering around her mother's table without bitterness filling the empty spaces, about hearing laughter instead of old arguments echoing through the halls, about letting the seasons soften what grief had hardened. She imagined the smell of cinnamon rolls in the oven, the glow of the tree in the corner, the crackle of the old fireplace. She imagined Daniel and Rebecca speaking kindly to each other, their mother smiling in that gentle way that made her eyes look young again, and she imagined God's peace, pure, steady, unmistakable, settling over their home like falling snow. Fear lived in her too, of course. Fear that no matter how hard she tried, the fractures were too deep. Fear that her siblings would cling to pride more than love. Fear that Christmas, instead of healing them, would only reopen every wound. But hope flickered stronger. She brought the wooden cross to her heart and prayed again, quieter this time. God, make our hearts simple again. Strip away everything but love. When she opened her eyes, the last bit of sunlight slipped behind the trees. A single star glimmered above the barn roof. Martha took it as a small reassurance, the kind God often gives without saying a word. Inside the house, her mother was calling her. The day was ending, and tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But Martha held onto her dream the way a farmer holds onto the promise of spring, even in the deepest winter. Even when nothing seems alive. Her dream was simple, but sometimes the simplest dreams are the hardest to keep, and the most worth fighting for. The first real heaviness of the season settled on Martha one biting morning in early December. Frost coated the barn roof like crushed glass, and the air tasted sharp enough to cut. She pulled her coat tighter and stepped outside before sunrise, her boots crunching through the frozen ground. A pale light crept over the fields, revealing the quiet hush of winter. It should have been peaceful, but even the silence felt weighted, like the land itself sensed the tension brewing in the Ellison family. Martha's breath puffed into small clouds as she walked toward the chicken coop. She had been waking earlier than usual, partly to tend to chores and partly to pray in the stillness, away from her siblings' growing disputes. Nights had become restless. Her thoughts ran like wild horses, unruly and loud. Inside the coop, the hens murmured softly, their warmth filling the small space. Martha checked the feed, the water, and finally gathered the eggs with gentle hands. Simple tasks usually soothed her, but that morning a tremor of worry gnawed at her. Christmas was getting closer, and her family was getting colder. Later that afternoon, as grey clouds thickened overhead, Daniel stomped into the kitchen, carrying a stack of unpaid bills and a tightness in his jaw that Martha had learned to read all too well. Snowflakes clung to his coat. "We can't keep running things like this," he muttered, dropping the papers onto the table. "The property taxes alone, Martha, we're drowning." She set down the dish towel she'd been holding. "We can figure it out. Maybe cut back on—" "Cut back?" Daniel's voice cracked. "We've already cut everything. The repairs on the barn roof, the tractor's engine, the feed order, everything's behind. I'm just trying to keep the place alive." Martha felt his frustration like a cold draft across her heart. She stepped closer but kept her tone gentle. "I'm not against you, Daniel." He looked away, jaw clenching. "Feels like everyone is." Before she could answer, he stormed out, letting the screen door slam behind him. The house vibrated with the force of it. Martha pressed her hand to her chest, praying silently, "Lord, give me patience, give him peace." But the weight didn't lift. Just an hour later, Rebecca arrived, bringing with her the perfume of the city and the crisp rustle of shopping bags. She barely took off her coat before sighing dramatically. "I can't believe we're still stuck talking about the land," Rebecca said, tossing her scarf on a chair. "Daniel refuses to listen to reason. Selling would solve everything. Mom could move somewhere easier to manage. We could finally breathe." Martha swallowed her weariness. "It's not that simple." "It is," Rebecca insisted. "He's just being stubborn. You know how he is." Martha's shoulders sagged. "Rebecca, we're all hurting. It's not fair to pin everything on him." Rebecca's expression tightened. "I didn't come here to fight, Martha, but someone has to make a decision." She paused. "And if Daniel won't, then maybe the rest of us should." Her words landed heavily. Martha felt the old wooden floor beneath her feet as if it were shifting. She glanced toward the living room where their mother sat reading her Bible, unaware of the storm gathering around her children. Martha closed her eyes for a moment, feeling tears prick behind them. Lord, help me, I don't know how to hold this family together. That night, after everyone had gone quiet, Martha sat alone at the kitchen table. The only light came from the small lamp above the sink, casting a soft glow over the wooden cross lying in her hands. She traced its edges, worn smooth by years of prayers. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. The cold seeped through the walls. And inside her heart, fear pressed in like a tightening rope. What if I can't fix this? She whispered to God. What if Christmas comes and nothing changes? What if they never forgive each other? Her voice cracked, and a single tear fell onto the wooden table. She hadn't cried in months, not like this, not from the deep place where sorrow mixes with longing. She bowed her head, letting her tears fall freely now. Lord, I'm doing everything I can. Please meet me halfway. Please soften their hearts. Don't let this family fall apart. For a long while, the house was silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock. And then, unexpectedly, a small warmth brushed her like a soft touch on her shoulder. Not physical, but unmistakably present. A quiet reassurance. She lifted her gaze. The room itself hadn't changed, but something in her had. Still, the trials kept coming. The next morning, the water pump froze. Martha spent nearly 2 hours out in the biting cold, chipping ice and hauling buckets from the old well, her gloves soaked through, her fingers numbed. Her breath grew shallow from the cold. By midday, she was exhausted, physically and emotionally. She leaned against the barn wall, letting the rough wood press into her back as she whispered, "Why does everything feel so hard, Lord? Why now?" A single sparrow landed near her boot, hopping lightly in the snow. Its tiny presence felt like a reminder. God sees even the smallest of his creatures. She exhaled slowly. Faith bent, but not broken. Martha picked herself up, brushed the frost from her coat, and returned to her chores. Because that's what people of faith do. They keep going, even when the world feels heavy. But inside her heart, the tension grew like ice spreading across a quiet pond. Christmas was coming, and so was the breaking point. In every family conflict, there is always someone who stirs the pot, not always out of cruelty, but out of pride dressed as certainty. In the Ellison family, that role fell to Rebecca more often than anyone wanted to admit. By mid-December, the tension curled around the farmhouse like smoke. Even the walls felt like they listened. One icy Saturday morning, Martha walked into the kitchen to find Rebecca already there, standing over a stack of legal papers. Her perfectly manicured fingers tapped rhythmically against the table, tap, 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 like a small hammer striking the same bruise. Rebecca didn't look up. "We need signatures, Martha, not prayers." Martha stiffened, the words slicing deeper than Rebecca knew. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple," Rebecca insisted sharply. "Mom's health is declining. Daniel is drowning trying to maintain the land, and you—" She paused, softening her tone, but not her intention. "You're trying to keep peace where peace doesn't exist." Martha's jaw tightened. "I believe God can restore what looks broken." Rebecca scoffed. "God helps those who help themselves." "That's not scripture," Martha replied softly. Rebecca's lips pressed together. "Well, it should be." She slid the paperwork across the table, a proposed plan to sell part of the land, including the northern pasture their father cherished. The same peace he once told Martha held their family's history and future. "It's time," Rebecca said. "If Daniel won't do the right thing, then we will." This was the first trap, a decision forced through urgency and pressure. Martha breathed deeply, silently praying, "Lord, help me speak with love." She pushed the papers back gently. "I won't sign anything until we're all in agreement." Rebecca's eyes hardened. "Then you're choosing Daniel over us?" "No," Martha whispered, steady. "I'm choosing unity over division." Rebecca grabbed her purse sharply. "Unity is impossible with people who refuse to move forward." She swept out of the room, leaving a trail of cold perfume and colder judgment behind. The next injustice came 3 days later, when Daniel discovered Rebecca had gone behind their backs. Martha found him in the barn, red-faced from fury and the cold. "She's meeting with real estate agents," he spat. "They were here this morning, walking the property lines like they already owned the place." Martha's breath caught. "Without telling us?" Daniel kicked the frozen ground. "She's trying to force our hand. She thinks I'm incapable of running what Dad built." "She's hurting," Martha offered gently. "We're all hurting," Daniel snapped. Then softer, "But she doesn't get to make decisions for the whole family." Martha placed a hand on his arm. "We'll handle it, together." But Daniel wasn't finished. "That's not all," he said. "She showed them Dad's notebook." The words slammed into Martha harder than the cold ever could. Their father's notebook, filled with handwritten plans, dreams for the land, scriptures scribbled in the margins, was sacred. It was the closest thing they had to hearing his voice again. "She had no right," Martha whispered. Daniel nodded. "She's using Dad's words to argue that he wanted the land sold someday." Martha closed her eyes. She knew their father better than that. He dreamed of legacy, not liquidation. This was the second trap, using their father's memory as leverage. That night, the family sat around the dinner table with tension so thick it felt like an extra place setting. Their mother, Helen, sensed the storm before anyone spoke. "What's going on?" she asked softly. Rebecca set down her fork. She had come prepared, dressed in confidence and irritation. "Mom, we need to talk about the land." Daniel slammed his hand lightly against the table. "Rebecca, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," she countered. "We're running out of options." Martha looked between them, helpless. Helen frowned. "Children, it's Christmas. Can't we give our hearts a little rest?" "No," Rebecca said firmly. "We've rested too long." Daniel's voice rose. "Dad wouldn't want the land sold." "That's not true," Rebecca snapped back. "He told me once." "He told me something different," Daniel shot back. "I have his notebook," Rebecca said, "and his own handwriting proves that notebook isn't yours to use." Martha finally burst out, her voice trembling. "It's sacred. It's Dad's heart on paper, not ammunition for an argument." The room froze. Rebecca stared at Martha, shocked and wounded. Helen placed a hand over her Bible, eyes glistening. "Your father didn't want this." But neither sibling heard her. Pride speaks louder than grief. Rebecca stood abruptly. "If you all want to live in the past, fine, but I won't be dragged down by sentiment." She left the table. The front door slammed. Martha felt the sound ripple through her bones. The next day, Martha found Rebecca packing her things in her childhood room, clothes, makeup, stacks of presents she had intended to wrap. But her movements were sharp, agitated, angry. "Are you leaving?" Martha whispered. Rebecca didn't look up. "I can't stay in a house where I'm treated like the villain." "Nobody thinks that." Rebecca turned, eyes burning. "Daniel does. And now, you do too." Martha stepped closer. "No, I think you're scared. So am I. But running won't fix anything." Rebecca shook her head. "You talk about God and unity like it's all so simple. But life isn't that clean, Martha. Faith doesn't change numbers on bills. It doesn't fix roofs or stop winters from killing crops." "But it changes hearts," Martha said quietly. Rebecca's eyes glistened, but she turned away quickly. "Maybe yours." Her voice cracked, but she wouldn't let Martha comfort her. She zipped her suitcase, brushed past her sister, and walked out. Martha followed her to the porch. Snow fell quietly, soft as feathers. "Rebecca," she said gently, "don't do this alone." Rebecca didn't turn around. "I already am." Her car engine roared to life, tires crunching over the fresh snow as she drove away. Martha stood there long after the car disappeared down the road. Snow settled on her coat, her hair, her shoulders, but the real weight was inside her. She whispered into the cold, "Lord, everything is falling apart." A single tear warmed her cheek before the wind coldly claimed it. The injustice stung deep, and Christmas was only days away. Snow continued falling through the next 2 days, quiet as breath, covering the Ellison farm in a soft white blanket. But inside Martha, a storm churned. She prayed whenever she had a moment alone, asking God to shield her siblings from their own pride, from their grief, from the hard edges they carried around like armor. On the 3rd morning, the phone rang. Martha answered, expecting Rebecca's usual clipped tone, but this voice was different, tired, shaken. "Martha," Rebecca whispered, "can you talk?" Martha felt a pang of worry. "Of course. Are you all right?" A long silence, then a trembling breath. "I messed up." The words fell heavy and fragile, like something breaking after being held too tightly for too long. "What happened?" Martha asked, her voice softening instinctively. Rebecca exhaled shakily. "The real estate agents backed out. They said the land value isn't what they expected. They're not interested anymore." Martha blinked. "Rebecca, I'm sorry. I know that must hurt." "That's not the worst part," Rebecca added, voice cracking. "The appraisal they introduced. It's public record now. Daniel found it. He saw everything, including my emails, including my intentions." Martha closed her eyes. She had prayed for truth. But truth often arrives with painful clarity. "Where are you?" Martha asked. "In town. I didn't want to come back yet. I didn't want to face him." Another shaky breath. "I was so sure I was right, Martha. I thought I was helping, but I wasn't helping anyone. I wasn't even listening." Her words were soft, remorseful, like frost melting under the first touch of sunlight. This wasn't punishment. This was consequence. Gentle, necessary, God-shaped. Martha leaned against the counter, her heart opening with compassion. "Rebecca, you weren't trying to hurt us. You were trying to stop the hurt. You just lost your way a little." Rebecca sniffled. "Daniel looked at me today like I betrayed him." Martha let silence answer for a moment. Then she spoke with calm, steady truth. "Maybe you did. But betrayal isn't the end of a story. Not with God. Sometimes it's the doorway back to humility." Rebecca cried softly on the line, her pride finally cracking. "I don't know how to fix this, Martha." "You don't have to fix it alone." Another long pause. Then a faint whisper. "Will you pray for me?" Martha's eyes filled. "Always." They prayed right there over the phone. Simple words, quiet, trembling, honest. It felt like heaven leaned closer. Later that afternoon, Daniel came into the kitchen, jaw tight as usual, but his eyes softer somehow. "Martha," he said gruffly. "Rebecca called me." Martha folded a dish towel. "I know." He hesitated, searching for words. "She said she's sorry." "Are you willing to forgive her?" Martha asked gently. Daniel exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know. Maybe. It hurt." Martha stepped closer. "Daniel, Dad always said the land was meant to hold us together, not see us break apart." Daniel's eyes dropped. "I miss him." "I know," Martha whispered. "We all do. But maybe we're learning the hard way that holding on to resentment doesn't bring him back." He nodded slowly, the fight draining out of him. Natural justice had done its work, not with thunder but with truth, not with punishment but with revelation. Pride had stumbled, and humility began to bloom. By evening, a neighbor named Mrs. Harding, an elderly widow who'd known the Ellisons all her life, stopped by with a basket of cornbread. "I heard there's trouble among you," she said gently. "Your daddy was a good man, and he always said his kids would honor this land by honoring each other." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. Daniel bowed his head. Martha swallowed her tears. Even their mother, Helen, closed her eyes, as if hearing her husband's voice echo through the room. The pride, the pushing, the manipulation, all of it began to crumble, not by force, not by revenge, just truth, just consequence. Just the quiet justice of God working through circumstance, through community, through conscience. Martha felt a shift, subtle but unmistakable. Something was breaking, but something was also beginning to heal. The morning of Christmas Eve rose quiet and pale, the kind of winter dawn that felt like the world was holding its breath. Frost clung to the windows like lace, and the fields shimmered under a thin blanket of silver light. Inside the Ellison farmhouse, the air held a gentler stillness, one that hinted something holy was approaching. Martha awoke before sunrise, as she often did, but today she felt a stirring in her spirit, something warm, something expectant. She wrapped herself in her father's old flannel coat and stepped onto the porch. The sky was soft grey, almost glowing. A light snow drifted down like slow-falling feathers. The wind, usually sharp and biting, felt strangely mild, almost comforting. Martha closed her eyes and whispered, "Lord, we need you today. Make this house a place of peace again." Her breath rose into the air, mingling with the falling snow. She clutched the small wooden cross in her hand, and for a brief moment she felt something like warmth brushing across her chest, gentle and unmistakable. It was subtle, but it was enough. When she returned inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon and coffee. Her mother, Helen, was stirring a pot on the stove, humming an old hymn with a tenderness Martha hadn't heard in months. "Morning, sweetheart," Helen said, turning with a smile that seemed to carry sunlight in it. Martha kissed her cheek. "Morning, Mama." The moment felt like a blessing. Not long after, the front door opened. A cold gust swept in, and behind it came Daniel, carrying an armful of firewood. His cheeks were flushed from the cold, but his voice carried a quiet sincerity. "I called Rebecca," he said, setting the wood down, "told her to come home." Martha's eyes softened. "And she's on her way." A fragile hope bloomed inside Martha so quickly she almost lost her breath. By noon, the farmhouse was warm and glowing. The fireplace crackled with steady comfort. The tree lights sparkled with new brightness. Even the air felt lighter. Then headlights appeared at the end of the lane. Martha looked out the window and felt her heart tap twice in her chest. Rebecca's car slowed, crunching through the snow, stopping beside the porch. Rebecca stepped out, her posture uncertain, her eyes red as if she'd cried the whole way there. She held herself tightly, not from the cold, but from fear. Fear of rejection, of judgment, of not belonging anymore. Martha opened the front door before Rebecca could knock. They stood facing each other in the soft hush of falling snow. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Rebecca whispered, voice trembling, "I'm sorry." It cracked something open in both of them. Martha stepped forward and wrapped her sister in a long, trembling embrace, the kind that carries forgiveness in its very breath. Rebecca leaned into her, shoulders shaking, tears warming her cheeks. Inside the house, Daniel appeared in the doorway. His voice was rough, but his eyes were soft. "Come inside, Rebecca. It's cold out there." That simple invitation, just 5 words, felt like a small miracle. Rebecca nodded, brushing tears from her face. "Thank you." The family gathered in the living room. Helen placed her Bible on her lap and smiled at her 3 children sitting together for the first time in months without tension choking the space. "Before anything else," she said softly, "I'd like to pray." Everyone bowed their heads instinctively. "Lord," Helen prayed, her voice warm and steady, "thank you for bringing my children home, not just to this house, but to each other. Thank you for softening hearts, for quieting pride, for allowing your peace to enter these walls. Let today be a new beginning, and let love be our guide." When she finished, the room felt hushed, holy, touched by something unseen. A sudden beam of sunlight broke through the clouds outside, sliding across the floor like a golden ribbon. It landed gently on the coffee table, right on top of their father's old notebook. Everyone noticed. No one spoke. It felt like a blessing, a sign, a quiet whisper from heaven. Later in the afternoon, as they prepared dinner together, Daniel stepped away for a moment, then returned holding their father's notebook. He opened it carefully, turning to a page marked with the faintest corner fold. "I want you both to see this," he said. On that page, in their father's familiar handwriting, were the words, "This land is only worth keeping if it keeps our family together. If it ever divides my children, then let them choose unity over soil." Rebecca gasped softly. Her hand flew to her mouth. Martha felt tears fall instantly. Daniel shut the notebook gently. "I think we finally know what he wanted." No anger. No pride, just understanding, just peace. And right then, without wind, without reason, the old farmhouse lights flickered softly, then brightened. The fire flared gently in the hearth. The room warmed as though someone had wrapped the entire house in a quilt of comfort. It was subtle, but it was unmistakable. Divine reassurance. Martha whispered, barely audible, "Thank you, Lord." A small chorus of gratitude rose in every heart, and for the first time in a long season, peace settled over the Ellison family. Not forced peace, not fake peace, but the kind only God can give. Winter deepened around the Ellison farm, but inside the old house, warmth grew like a quiet fire that no storm could touch. After dinner, the family sat together in the glow of the Christmas tree, the air filled with something gentle and healing. Martha looked at her siblings, Daniel leaning back in his father's chair, Rebecca sipping hot chocolate beside the fireplace, their mother humming a soft hymn while knitting, and her heart swelled. The land hadn't changed. The bills hadn't magically disappeared. The winter was still long, but their hearts were different. Forgiveness had taken root. Pride had stepped aside, simplicity had returned, like fresh snow covering the roughness of yesterday. In that humble, quiet moment, Martha understood something she had been reaching for all season. Peace doesn't come from fixing everything. Peace comes from surrendering everything to God. Their father's dream had never been about acres or fences or legal papers. It was about the kind of love that holds a family together through seasons of cold and seasons of bloom. And now, finally, that dream was alive again. As the fire crackled softly, Martha whispered a final prayer of gratitude. "Lord, thank you for making our hearts simple again." The home that welcomes humility becomes a house of peace. And the family that chooses love over pride never loses its way. As the Ellison family learned, peace doesn't come wrapped in perfect moments or polished memories. It comes when hearts finally rest, when pride melts, when God is invited back into the center of the home. If this story touched you, let it be a reminder that even in the coldest seasons of life, God is quietly working, gently guiding, and lovingly restoring what feels lost. Now I want to hear from you. If you believe that God can bring peace to any home, No matter how wounded, no matter how divided, write in the comments. God's peace starts in my heart. Let this be your declaration today.